Live television has always had a certain kind of magic to it, always carrying with it the thrill of the unedited footage that unfolds in real time. Sometimes it brings laughter through awkward slip-ups or silly bloopers.
I was choking on a banana a couple of years ago. Remember I told you? I kid you.
Yet at other times, it manages to capture moments far more unsettling. Moments so bizarre and sudden that they burn themselves into the memory of everyone watching, especially those who see them unfold live. Like this first disturbing incident, which was captured on August 19, 1987, at NBC's Burbank studio. The same place where shows like The Tonight Show and Wheel of Fortune were filmed, along with live news broadcasts. Despite the high-profile productions, security at the time wasn't nearly as strict as you'd expect. Visitors used to come and go freely without much barricading, and on this particular day, one visitor would completely shatter that sense of normalcy. A man named Gary Stolman enters the NBC studio not as an intruder, but as the guest of his father, who worked there. No one bothered questioning him, as employees often brought family along for a behind-the-scenes look. But that day, Gary wasn't there just to observe. As the countdown to the live broadcast began, the studio followed its usual rhythm. Cameras were rolling, mics were tested, producers watched from the control room. Everything was in place for a smooth show. But just off camera, Gary waited for the perfect moment to act. In the middle of the broadcast, he casually walked directly onto the set, catching news anchor David Horowitz and the crew off guard.
Because, you know, one of the nicest things about shopping by mail order...
Holding what looked like a gun, Gary then handed David a note and demanded that he read it live.
Let me see what it says.
The confusion was clear on David's face as he began to read the note aloud.
Let me read this. Folks, we have someone on the set who's standing here and would like me to read this copy which was just handed to me. You want to tell me your name or not? What is it? And Gary, where are you from?
And that's when the broadcast abruptly cut to black. But inside the studio, the tension was very real. David had no way of knowing they were no longer live. And faced with an impossible choice, he chose to read the statement on the piece of paper handed over to him at gunpoint, which was a rambling manifesto filled with paranoid delusions.
I was warned in 1981 by someone with connections at the CIA to stay off the computers, that they didn't trust people on computers. When I began receiving disturbing calls from my parents, which led me to believe that something terrible was going on. I was then forced into a mental hospital in Tallahassee, where I learned that my brother-in-law had been driven insane in the same manner that someone was trying to do to me.
Gary claimed that the government had replaced his father with an alien clone, and that they were trying to silence him. David read the entire note calmly, hoping to defuse the situation. But what Gary didn't realize was that none of it had been aired live. Later that day, NBC ran a segment about the incident and played the final line of David's reading.
There is no way I can harm anyone with this empty BB gun.
Police arrived shortly afterward and arrested Gary Stolman. No one was hurt, but the moment remains one of the strangest and most surreal incidents ever to occur during a live television broadcast. Zusha Park was one of Brazil's most beloved children's television shows, filmed on a vibrant set in Rio de Janeiro. But on what was supposed to be a routine episode, host Xuxa Meneghel was performing the closing musical number alongside her dancers when things went horribly wrong. A small fire began in a mechanical spaceship prop, the same one Xuxa typically used for dramatic entrances and exits. At first, no one seemed to notice it, but within moments, the flames spread so rapidly, they engulfed the entire set in smoke and fire. The studio audience, made up of around 300 people, mostly of which were children, had to be evacuated in a rush. Fortunately, there were no deaths. But 26 people were injured, 7 of whom were left in critical condition, suffering from smoke inhalation and severe burns. What made this incident even more disturbing was that the cameras kept rolling. Viewers later watched the horrific scenes live as technicians fled the scene and panic unfolded on live television. It was a footage that shocked the entire country. An investigation revealed that the fire had been caused by an electrical short circuit in the spaceship prop. But beyond that, it exposed serious safety lapses. including locked emergency exits and the use of highly flammable materials on set that lit up with no resistance, spreading the fire at a horrifyingly rapid rate. In many ways, it was an accident waiting to happen. Zusha herself wasn't physically harmed, but the emotional toll on her was heavy. She spent the following months visiting victims in the hospital and offering support to their families. The show was initially put on halt and eventually canceled. 8 unaired episodes were permanently shelved, and the final episode of Zusha Park aired just days before the incident, on January 6, 2001. Before moving on to the next segment of the video, if you've made it this far, please consider leaving a like and dropping a comment, whether it's your thoughts on the video or just how your day's been. It may seem small, but it goes a long way in helping this channel grow and reach more people through the algorithm. And if you enjoy content like this, don't forget to subscribe and help us hit our first 1,000 subscribers. I promise, you won't regret it. Now from here on, things are only going to get even more bizarre, as the next incident that we're diving into is still one of the strangest and most mysterious ones in live television history. It was the night of November 22nd, 1987 in Chicago, Illinois. Most viewers in the area were casually watching television. Some tuned into the nightly news on WGN, while others catching an episode of Doctor Who on WTTW, the local PBS affiliate. What was supposed to be just another evening of regular programming took a sharp and unsettling turn. At 9:14 p.m., during the sports segment of WGN's newscast, the screen suddenly cut to black, and a few seconds later, it was replaced by a figure wearing a rubber Max Headroom mask, a character known for his jittery, computer-generated persona. The background behind him was made to resemble the original character's signature digital lines, created crudely with a sheet of moving corrugated metal. No message was immediately clear. The audio was distorted. Garbled laughter filled the speakers, and the figure swayed and gestured erratically, mocking broadcasters, corporations, and television culture itself. The interruption lasted just under 30 seconds, before WGN engineers quickly regained control.
Well, if you're wondering what's happened, so am I. Actually,
but the story didn't end there, as later that same night at 11:15 p.m., viewers of WTTW's airing of Doctor Who were again interrupted. This time, for nearly 90 seconds, the same masked figure reappeared, now speaking in a bizarre, high-pitched voice and making increasingly erratic movements. At one point, he held up a glove and spoke gibberish while laughing hysterically. The transmission ended with a disturbing image, the figure being lightly spanked with a fly swatter by a person who seemed like a woman in a dress. Then the screen went black. Despite investigations by the FCC and local authorities, the perpetrators were never identified. To this day, the Max Headroom broadcast hijackings remain one of the most bizarre and unsettling examples of live television being compromised. Not with violence, but with something equally disturbing: total unpredictability. It was May 11th, 1985. A sunny, exciting Saturday afternoon in Bradford, England. Thousands of fans had gathered at Valley Parade Stadium to watch their beloved Bradford City football team face off against Lincoln City. And thousands more were watching it live from the comfort of their homes. The atmosphere was electric. Bradford City had already secured the 3rd Division championship, and this final match was meant to be a celebration, a joyful send-off to a triumphant season. The stands were packed, fans eager to cheer on their team one last time before summer. But beneath the surface of this celebration, a hidden danger had been building for years. The main stand at Valley Parade was a large structure, built mostly of wood. It had stood there since 1908 and had hosted countless matches. But beneath those wooden seats, piles of rubbish had accumulated. Old newspapers, discarded food wrappers, and general trash packed into the spaces just under the stands. The structure was outdated and unsafe, yet no real action had been taken. In fact, the stand was scheduled for demolition just 2 days later. Inspectors had already warned the club about the fire risks, but nothing had been done yet. Maybe the club management was planning for the season's last game to end before initiating renovation. But little did they know, it would be a decision that would have disastrous consequences, one that would go down in history for all the wrong reasons. No one in the crowd knew this. Everyone was focused on the match. Around the 40th minute, a thin wisp of smoke began to rise from beneath the wooden seating. At first, it was barely noticeable, perhaps just a cigarette. But what started as a flicker became something far more life-threatening. One cigarette accidentally dropped through a gap in the stands, landed on the piles of dry, flammable rubbish below. Within seconds, the paper caught fire, and within minutes, the flames exploded upward, feeding on the trash and spreading rapidly through the dry timberwood. Broadcasters watching from the commentary booth struggled to process what was unfolding in front of them. At first, they stayed composed, reporting the incident like any other event. But as the flames grew, so did the horror in their voices.
But a day of triumph could turn into a day of disaster here for Bradford. And the 2,500 people in that stand are panicking. They are frantic to get out. There is no cause for celebration for anybody here. This is awful. The heat is now becoming tremendous. I'm sitting immediately opposite the main stand, and I can feel the heat. It's almost beginning to burn me over here, quite honestly. Quite extraordinary scenes at Valley Parade.
The fire raced through the structure, wind fanning it across the entire stand. There was almost no time to react. People panicked, running towards the escape routes all at once, causing a blockage at the exit. What was supposed to be a day of triumph had turned into a nightmare.
And look at that! Oh, the poor man! Oh, this is awful! The police desperately trying to save the life of a supporter.
In the end, 56 spectators lost their lives. Dozens more were injured, and hundreds of lives were forever changed. Many of the victims were found pinned to their seats by falling debris, unable to flee. The Valley Parade fire remains one of the darkest tragedies in the history of British football. A horrifying reminder of what can happen when warnings go unheeded. Another one of the most disturbing live TV occurrences happened on April 30th, 1993, during a quarter-final match at the Citizen Cup in Hamburg, Germany. Monica Seles, the world's #1 ranked female tennis player at the time, was leading her match against Magdalena Malieva. The atmosphere was calm, until out of nowhere, it was violently shattered. Suddenly, a man emerged from the crowd, ran onto the court, and stabbed Monica between the shoulder blades with a 9-inch boning knife. The wound was half an inch deep, missing her spine and vital organs by mere centimeters. But the attack was as psychological as it was physical. The man was later identified as Günter Parche, an obsessed fan of Monica's rival, Steffi Graf. His motive was disturbingly simple. He wanted to remove Monica from the game so that Graf could reclaim the top spot in the rankings. While Monica's physical injuries healed within weeks, the emotional damage lingered for much longer. She stepped away from the sport for over 2 years, battling depression and an eating disorder. The attack had happened at the height of her career, and it changed everything. The tennis world's response to the incident was deeply controversial. A proposal to freeze her #1 ranking during her absence was voted down by fellow players, with only one abstaining. Rhythm, dominance, and mental edge that had defined her early career never seemed to fully return. As for the attacker, Günter Parcha was deemed psychologically unfit for prison. He received a 2-year suspended sentence and served no jail time, despite committing a violent attack in front of thousands of spectators. To this day, the incident remains one of the darkest chapters in tennis history, a moment that ended what might have been one of the greatest careers the sport has ever seen. And finally, the last and the most distressing segment of this video. Please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing the video if you haven't already as we dive into it. On January 22nd, 1987, in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a press conference was scheduled at the Pennsylvania State Capitol, and Robert Budd Dwyer, the state treasurer at the time, had been recently convicted of receiving bribes related to the awarding of a state contract, which was a charge he strongly denied. He was facing sentencing the next day and was expected to resign from his position during the broadcast. News crews gathered in the room, as did several of Dwyer's staffers and reporters, and the cameras started to roll.
They know I'm innocent and want to help.
At first, it seemed like a typical political statement. Dwyer read a lengthy letter, reaffirming his innocence, criticizing the judicial process, and reflecting on the impact the case had on his life and family. But then what followed turned out to be a living nightmare for everyone watching live, and even more horrific for those present in the same room as Mr. Robert Budd Dwyer that day. Instead of concluding with a resignation, Dwyer pulls out a manila envelope and removed a .357 Magnum revolver from inside. Panic erupted in the room. Staff and journalists rushed toward him, pleading for him to stop. But it was too late. Dwyer had already made his decision, and in front of everyone present, including live rolling cameras, Budd Dwyer placed the gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. The image is too graphic that I had to censor this part of the footage, because what follows is extremely difficult to watch, and showing it would likely result in this video being taken down or restricted. But even with the footage censored, the impact is undeniable. The room erupted into chaos, screams, and panic, and Dwyer was declared lifeless at the scene. What followed was total chaos. Some cameras cut away, others kept rolling. Those who watched live were stunned into silence. Though the most graphic footage was never re-aired on mainstream news, it circulated widely in later years, becoming one of the most disturbing moments ever captured during a live political event. Dwyer's death sparked a national debate, not only about the case itself, but about media ethics, mental health, and the psychological toll of public scandal. More than 3 decades later, the press conference still remains as haunting as it happened at the time. Make sure to comment your thoughts down below. I'll reply to each comment and pin the best one. Also, make sure to like and subscribe for more such content. I'll see you in my next video. Until then, stay spooky.